A powerful storm system is set to impact the United States over the next few days, and this will bring the risk of significant severe weather. This includes damaging winds, large hail, and strong tornadoes anywhere from the Great Plains back into the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. Additionally, warm temperatures are expected to continue throughout the rest of April, and a death ridge could form in early to mid-May, which will lead to even drier and warmer conditions for a large chunk of the United States. So in today's forecast, we are going to break down exactly what you need to know about the weather that'll be impacting the United States over the next 7 days. And we'll begin with what's happening across the country today. And along the East Coast, we've actually had plenty of showers and thunderstorms over the last 24 hours. This is a broad low pressure system that will continue to bring a risk for some isolated severe weather today, but this will all eventually move offshore as we go into tomorrow. Back over in the southern plains, we've had an active stretch of weather the last several days with giant hail as large as 5.5 inches in diameter. Additionally, we've had a bunch of tornadoes, including even a few tornadoes yesterday back over in West Texas. And unfortunately, more severe weather's ahead today, and there could even be some more tomorrow before we start to at least quiet down a little bit on Monday, and then it's going to ramp right back up as we go into Tuesday and Wednesday in these same exact areas. And from yesterday's severe weather event, we did at least have a few tornadoes back over in West Texas, mostly rural areas to the northwest of Lubbock. Aside from that, it was not really any sort of outbreak here, just a bunch of severe storms, lots of hail, lots of wind. We end up having, though, a few tornadoes across the board, even some in the overnight hours back around Amarillo. Now let's talk more about the severe weather potential over the next several days, and we'll begin with today. We do have a marginal risk of severe weather in place in two different areas, one of which is back along the East Coast where isolated damaging winds and hail will be possible this afternoon, and then back over in the southern plains, a large marginal threat of severe weather is in place. It almost looks like a duck that goes anywhere from around Colorado back towards Shreveport, Louisiana. It does include areas just north and west of Dallas-Fort Worth, where we will have the potential for some large hail and damaging winds. We might actually get a small slight risk of severe weather, perhaps back over in New Mexico or West Texas, and I wouldn't honestly rule out something back over in maybe southeastern Oklahoma, depending on what happens with our storms over the next few hours. That is something we'll have to keep a close eye on, so there could be an upgrade to our risk. But again, hail and wind are the main concerns. There will also be a low-end tornado risk. This will be mostly maximized out of any discrete cells that form this afternoon into the early evening hours. I think our main target areas will be back over New Mexico and West Texas, and then perhaps an isolated tornado threat back over near Wichita Falls, and then another one maybe over in southeastern Oklahoma. And I know I'm being pretty specific here, but I do think that these will be the main areas to keep an eye on this afternoon for the threat of a couple of tornadoes. And there's a chance that we go live later today, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel and click the bell icon so you're notified if we do go live. Now, as we go into Sunday, the threat of severe weather is a very large area, but it is also a conditional risk across the board, which is why the majority of this region is in a level 1 out of 5 severe weather risk, which is a marginal threat of severe weather. This goes from Texas all the way back up into North Dakota and Minnesota. We also have a slight risk of severe weather that is in place in Nebraska, Kansas, and South Dakota. The main concern for Sunday will be damaging winds and large hail, especially back over in central Nebraska. There will also be a chance, though, for a couple of tornadoes, and the threat of tornadoes, again, is going to be highly conditional on when our trough ejects. We actually could end up seeing a very significant threat of tornadoes, but it's going to depend really, again, on the timing of this low pressure system, which for right now, it really does not look like it's going to be timed correctly for a tornado outbreak, but we legitimately could actually have one if this trough was even 6 to even 12 hours faster. So something to keep in mind here, but generally it looks like for Sunday, the threat of tornadoes is low, but it definitely is not zero. And then once we go into Monday, a substantial outbreak of severe weather appears likely anywhere from the Midwest back into the southern plains. This is a very rare situation. We do not see this very often, but the Storm Prediction Center has issued a level 4 out of 5 moderate risk of severe weather for parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa, where there will be an elevated threat for strong, intense, perhaps even long-track tornadoes in this specific region. There will also be some numerous to widespread damaging winds across anywhere in our enhanced and moderate risk of severe weather. This entire region, though, is where we are watching for the most elevated potential of a severe weather outbreak, with numerous to widespread damaging winds, large hail, and strong tornadoes being in play. The slight risk of severe weather goes all the way back down into Texas and also into Michigan, but generally speaking, this is a huge area, and we are expecting a potential for a substantial severe weather outbreak. Monday is a day that you definitely want to make sure that you're staying weather aware if you are in the Midwest. It is still a little bit too early to tell whether there will be a high risk of severe weather in a future outlook, but there's high confidence with all the ingredients that are coming together, including a very strong low-level jet, in addition to tons of wind shear, and as well as a lot of instability being in this environment, and also the dew points being in the mid to upper 60s. This is going to make it a very favorable environment for a severe weather outbreak and more than likely a tornado outbreak. They also have a hatched region where significant severe weather will be in play across Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, all the way back down into Texas. I do think our most elevated threat of tornadoes will be in this region right here, this corridor. I honestly wouldn't rule out a strong tornado, though, even back down into Oklahoma. It is going to be contingent, though, depending on our capping situation in these areas and if we see discrete supercells. But I think how Monday will go is that we're going to start with discrete supercells in the afternoon, and then it will eventually translate into a squall line as we go into the evening, when that will be producing some significant damaging winds in addition to some embedded tornadoes in that line of thunderstorms. With the intense tornadoes and potentially long track tornadoes should be mostly geared towards the afternoon hours in these areas. And then as we go into Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, severe weather will continue in a very large area. We'll be talking more about this in this forecast, but also going way more in detail on our future forecasts all about this, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel. So as we go later into this weekend, our risk of severe weather will be increasing, and the biggest reason why is because over the last week or so, we've been dealing with a lot of mesoscale events back over in the central and southern plains, which have been very sporadic and also very random, depending on really small scale features in our environment. But this time we are talking about a synoptic weather pattern, which means we are going to be talking about a large low pressure system coming right over the Rockies. And once we go into late Sunday and Monday, this thing is really going to start to crank. It's going to be more than likely a negatively tilted trough moving into the central plains by late Monday and Tuesday, which will lead to the potential for an elevated risk of severe weather. Very strong southwesterly flow, even aloft, anywhere from central Kansas all the way back up into Wisconsin, which should elevate our risk for damaging winds and also several tornadoes across this region. So definitely something that we need to keep a very close eye on. And even by Tuesday and Wednesday, we are going to continue to see a risk of severe weather, even back over in the Ohio Valley, and another risk of severe weather is likely back over in the southern plains. So Monday through Wednesday look to be very active here across the country, especially Wednesday, as we will get another trough that'll eject in the southern plains. This should lead to more significant severe weather on Wednesday in the southern plains, and then by Thursday into Friday, things do become a bit more uncertain, but I think Thursday we will see a continuation of at least some severe weather back over in the Ohio Valley before eventually things get a little bit quieter by next weekend. And then in terms of our low-level jet, which will also help to amplify our tornado risk, it is expected to be relatively strong throughout the daytime on Monday, which will lead to a corridor for a favorable environment for tornadoes. It's going to be highly dependent on our storm mode, but if we have discrete and semi-discrete supercells, I don't really see us not seeing some sort of outbreak of severe weather on Monday, anywhere from the Midwest back into the central plains. And then eventually by Tuesday, our low-level jet is relatively weak across the board, but we should have enough low-level wind shear where we could see a couple of tornadoes anywhere from the northeast areas like New York all the way back down into parts of Texas. But I do think our storm mode on Tuesday is going to be a lot more linear, with a bunch of clusters of severe storms with damaging winds, hail, and even a few tornadoes. Eventually by Wednesday, our low-level jet will start to ramp up again back over in the southern plains. This should lead to some more significant severe weather on Wednesday and even perhaps into Thursday, again from Texas and Oklahoma back into Ohio and Indiana. And then eventually by Friday into Saturday, once again the weather pattern does become at least a little bit quieter. We could see another big storm system by the beginning of the following week, but again, that's just too far out to really talk about in detail at this time. Let's at least get by these next couple of events, which look to be the most significant over the next few days. Here's your significant tornado parameter values. As we go into Sunday, notice how our values are very high across the central and southern plains, but here's the big thing. We are likely going to have a cap in place throughout the day on Sunday, and I don't think we're going to see many storms initiate, but if we have any storms that become surface-based that do initiate in this environment and we have enough moisture, we definitely could see some strong tornadoes, but it is a very, very, very conditional risk as of right now for Sunday. By the time we go into Monday, that area of ingredients that is going to be very favorable for tornadoes will move into the Midwest. This is by around 4 o'clock on Monday, so our environment will begin to get a little bit more favorable across Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and then back into Kansas and Oklahoma. But look at the values by around 6, 7, 8 o'clock, and even by the late evening, we have an entire corridor here where we could be talking about tornadoes anywhere from the Midwest back into the central and southern plains. But again, it's going to depend on if storms do fire and where they fire, and if they're discrete, semi-discrete, or linear. That's going to play a big factor in terms of our tornado risk. But generally speaking, it does appear favorable for at least a few tornadoes and even a couple of strong tornadoes on Monday from the Midwest back into the central and southern plains. Now let's talk more about the timing of severe weather for the next few days, beginning with what's happening over the next 24 hours. There will be some showers and thunderstorms along the East Coast with a large low pressure system, but overall it is a broad low pressure system. Just a lot of rain across the Northeast today. A few damaging wind and hail threats will be possible anywhere from about New York back into North Carolina, and then some scattered severe weather in the southern plains, and we'll talk a little bit more about the details on that here in just a few moments. Eventually, by the time we go into Sunday, again, there will not be much storm activity, I don't think, on Sunday. Our low pressure system will be in the process of moving over the Rocky Mountains, but if it is able to go fast enough, we could see a couple of supercells forming, and those could produce some very large hail and a low tornado risk anywhere from Nebraska and Kansas back into Texas. By the time we go into Monday afternoon and evening, this low pressure system will be intensifying over Minnesota. This will lead to some widespread showers and thunderstorms across Minnesota and Iowa, and we should eventually start to see a more organized risk of severe weather take place during the late afternoon and early evening from Wisconsin back through Kansas City. There could even be a few storms that fire up as far south as areas like North Texas and Oklahoma, which could lead to some very large hail and even a low tornado risk. And then as we go into Monday evening, these storms will be approaching the Chicago area near Milwaukee and also moving across northern Missouri, moving in the direction of St. Louis and around Oklahoma City. We could also have a few supercells there. And then by the overnight hours, Monday into early Tuesday morning, the storms will begin to fall apart. Our severe weather risk will go down. And then eventually, as we go into Tuesday, we are talking about scattered severe weather across the Northeast. And then back over in the central and southern plains, it looks like we could get another little day here of some mesoscale features that could lead to more severe weather in those areas, with damaging winds and hail being the main concerns and a couple of tornadoes being a possibility. And we will go more in detail on Tuesday's threat of severe weather in our next forecast. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you're not already. As we go into Wednesday, a new low pressure system will move across the southern plains. This should at least lead to some scattered severe weather in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. And then by Thursday, that storm system is moving across the Ohio Valley and Dixie Alley. This is a very uncertain point in our time span here over the next 7 days. We don't exactly know what we're going to be seeing on Thursday, but it does look like there will be more severe weather in the forecast, at least for some of us. The degree of that intensity is very uncertain at this point, and then anytime beyond Thursday, things become a lot more uncertain. But one thing that definitely stands out to me is that a lot of models have been indicating that we'll at least have a surface-based and strong high-pressure system across the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and back into the northern plains and along the East Coast by the tail end of next weekend. And if this does happen, we will be dealing with at least a slightly more prolonged, dry and warm stretch of weather, especially for those along the eastern tier of the United States. Now going more into detail with our severe weather event for today, we will have scattered showers and thunderstorms out there this morning into the afternoon hours for a majority of central and western Oklahoma and the Texas Panhandle. Not expecting a whole lot of severe weather this morning, aside from some damaging winds and maybe a brief tornado. By this afternoon, storms will try to fire up again out in front of this line, mainly over in southern Oklahoma and far north Texas, where we could see an isolated tornado threat evolve. But I think generally damaging winds and hail will be our main concern this afternoon. If for some reason this tornado threat does start to perform and actually looks more concerning, we will likely be live, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Eventually by around 5 to 6 o'clock, that line of storms will form once again. It's going to be a cluster with some damaging winds continuing across eastern Oklahoma. Notice we'll also have some supercells firing off back over in eastern New Mexico, where there could be some tornadoes as well. This is a bit more of a conditional risk, but I do think we'll at least have some very large hail and maybe a tornado or two late this afternoon into the evening. And then eventually, as we go into the overnight hours, we'll have some storms going on in Arkansas as well as Louisiana, but this will be mostly just some isolated damaging winds. And then by Sunday morning, things are quieting down for the southern plains before they'll likely ramp up as we go into Monday and Tuesday. And as always, thank you all so much for watching today's forecast. If you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe down below. As a reminder, we will have videos pretty much every single day here for probably the next week or two, so make sure you are staying tuned. Click the bell icon down below. We'll have even more details in tomorrow's forecast, and we'll go way more in depth about our severe weather potential that's upcoming on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and even into Wednesday and Thursday. So stay tuned, and we'll see you guys all again in the next video.